Hey, everybody. I'm Chris Metzler, one of the programmers with SF DocFest. Um, and for those of you that have attended the festival before, we've been doing this for 23 years. We've been bringing some of the most interesting, irreverent, and just cool documentaries from around the world here to the Bay Area. And then occasionally we're lucky enough to have filmmakers in the Bay Area make films, and we get a chance to show them. And that's what you got just a chance to see with the really terrific documentary, My Secret Country. And we have director Marlo McKenzie here. Welcome, Marlo.
Hello. Thank you for having me, Chris.
Yeah, thanks. Always great to have filmmakers in our backyard as part of the festival, and such a neat film. Maybe a good place to start is like, what was the kind of catalyst for wanting to kind of go down this rabbit hole and tell the story?
Well, the story actually goes back to my childhood. So I had three imaginary friends. One was a unicorn, and one was a planet, and then I had a tiger. So they were very important to me in my childhood. And then later, when I became an adult, I was working at a shelter for children who were formerly homeless. And I realized that one of the big challenges that they faced was within their imagination, because they had trouble imagining themselves in a life that was really like where they could be successful and be surrounded by love. And that was the first time I realized the importance of imagination. And then I don't know, I was trying to film something else, and that person started talking about her imaginary friends. And so it just like happened. I was like, wow, why don't I do a project about imaginary friends? Because it's something I'm really interested in. And I feel so strongly about creativity and imagination and how important it is to our lives. And so that was kind of the launching pad.
But over did you so I was wondering, sometimes there's always this discussion of like, once a subject starts to be filmed, it kind of affects, you know, um, what the real reality is. And so I was wondering, like, once you started kind of making the film, did that um, transform characteristics about the world and imaginary friends, or the way that the kids and family saw it? Do you think?
Um, I'm not, so what I would say to that is we had a very special process for this film. It was one of my commitments was to have the children lead it as much as possible. And so, because they're really the experts in imagination. And
Mhm.
so I really listened to what they said and what they wanted for the movie. And they were all kind of saying, we'd love our imaginary friends to meet. And so what happened was we like arranged like story meetings. We had story meetings over email, and we had story meetings, one big story meeting over what was like Skype at the time before Zoom. And they actually wrote this story where their imaginary friends meet. They came up with the idea that dessert is going extinct, and they have to save dessert by finding the three magical ingredients. And I had said, oh, maybe there should be an inner critic who's like the bad guy causing problems. And then they were like, okay, well, if there's an inner critic, there should be an inner muse. And so we launched the process, and it was so collaborative all through the whole movie. Like I was sending them, how many heads does Squidgy have? Or so does this portal look right? What should the goblin's castle look like? How should this like background be? Is this enough smoke? There were just like all these like emails that went back and forth to make sure that they were, completely on board, and this was a representation of their world as much as possible. And so the process was just like very I it was for me, it was just a letting go, like, oh no, what am I doing? But also I think it was really great because that was how we infused this spirit of let's connect with our inner child. I think that's the great thing about this movie. It's like, hey, this is an infusion of the inner child. Thank you to the three children in the movie. And I think it like really inspires, it can inspire you to just get in touch with your creativity at a deeper level.
Yeah, most definitely. Um, So I say, one of the questions we often ask in Q&As is like, what were like some of the biggest challenges, and those challenges can also be positive too, Was there anything, I guess, that once you kind of started building the film, like, was there something that most surprised you about, something you hadn't expected during the course of the making of the film?
Well, so yeah, I didn't like if I knew what I was getting into. So the challenge was the animation. I just really didn't understand what that would take. And there were a lot of and also because it was important to make sure the children were all very like it was their world. It just took so much communication back and forth, like waiting. Is this how Milu's bark should sound? Milu the dog? Like, and then making sure like her parents finding a bark on their old like phones and like going through barks and then like the detail, the like, because I wanted it to be completely accurate to what they envisioned, it just took a long time. And then also animation itself is a very involved process. And I had a few animators come on and then they disappeared. And what actually happened, which was interesting, is I was inspired by the children and I invented an imaginary character to help me animate because I literally was so like, it was so hard for me. And I just pretend that I was with Uwarki, my imaginary animator friend, and we were doing it together because mostly I was working alone, and sometimes I had animators to help, but it was just the process of the animation was challenging, and I wish we had all of these AI tools. That was amazing, but that's okay. It's a learning process.
Well, yeah, and it probably wouldn't have the same sort of uniqueness and like flavor for the kids. So, what did they all think of the film? I assume they've all seen it. And like,
Yes.
what was kind of takeaway?
Well, yeah, they were all really happy with it. I was but they were so involved through the whole process, and I went back, I had filmed them when they were quite young, and then I went back 5 years later and I checked in and they had seen a draft. And at that point, they didn't even remember a lot of the things we had really filmed. And then
Hmm.
I went back, again a few years later and said, okay, this is pretty much the final. And they were just like really, I think the word would be nostalgic about it because there is a sense like this is a time capsule and it captured like something really beautiful, this like moment in childhood where we have this imagination that it changes when we're adults and there's something so precious about that, and to capture that in a movie, I did really feel they were all like quite pleased about that.
Cool. And when we kind of when the kind of credits roll and things, what is it that you kind of hope that not every documentary needs to have a message and things, but like what would you kind of like us to kind of take away in the way that we live our lives in the sense of after watching the film?
Sure. I just think that children have so much, we have so much to learn from children, and just to like really pay attention and respect their imaginations and listen to them. They have so much to teach us as adults. And I'm sure a lot of people do that already, but so then the other thing would be, just to maybe, I think we all have this like inner child that we can tap into. And if we do, it really transforms your life. It just like you can look at the world from a fresh perspective through those children's eyes and like really get into this idea of play, even though it seems hard as an adult when you're just rushing and you're overworked, to make time for play every day, or to just like look at something from a viewpoint that a child might see it from, where it's just like, wow, I just took 2 seconds to look at the flowers this morning and I feel so much better about my day. It's really it's a special thing that we can all tap into. And I hope it just kind of like charges everyone to feel like, yay, I have this child in me and I'm going to befriend this child again if I haven't already. And it'll make my perception of the world so, so wonderful.
No, very cool. It definitely left me feeling that way, and it's one of those things where it's like sometimes you would know it already, but you need a reminder to actually take the action,
Yeah.
And I just have to say, thanks for taking the time to kind of like really bring those details to fruition, because that takes a lot of patience and endurance. And so it wound up being a very cool film. And thank you again for being part of SF DocFest.
Thank you so much for, yes, inviting My Secret Country to be a part of SF DocFest.